What is up, party people? Party people in the chat. What is up? Hello, hello. Welcome to the live stream. How's everyone doing? Hello, hello. I gotta tell you, I'm feeling very productive today. I don't know what it is. I'm not loaded up with caffeine. I'm not haven't been itching to write. I just feel like I'm ready to focus on something. Really gotta focus on something. Millennium Storyteller. Hello, sorry couldn't make it last night. Are you kidding me? Look, it is always a joy to have you in chat, but it's never an expectation. Never an expectation. Glad to have you today. Glad to have you today. How's everyone doing? Just Guy, hello. Hello, welcome. Hi, Just Guy. How's it going? How's it going? Manon, hello again. Hello to you, Manon. Welcome. Welcome to the live stream. Hope everyone's doing well. Hope everyone's doing well. I gotta tell you, I've been working on a script all day. It's been doing like a college research paper. And I like those kind of videos. Still don't know exactly how I'm gonna present it. I'm looking at... Let me know what you think of this. I'm looking at technology in the artistic creative field and how the artistic creative field responded to that technology in the past. And then the idea being, what can we learn from the past history and how technology disrupted the creative landscape that we can try to apply to AI in writing and imaging? So I've been doing a lot of research into a lot of really interesting things to talk about one day. This isn't a video, it's probably even going to be done in this month, but I love me a good video essay. I love me a video that breaks down a very specific concept with examples and images, and you know, there's something special about those kind of videos. So I'd like to do one of those one day. Atario, hey to you. How's it going? Technology versus artistry, not so much versus, but like what technology has disrupted the creative space in the past, right? How did portrait painters respond to the advent of portrait photography? Was it something that seemingly threatened what they were doing? Or was it something that they embraced as a way to, as a different art form and not a direct threat to what they were doing? How did they respond to it? What are what are they called? First person sources? What are they called? I feel like first person's not the right word. What were the direct things being written at the time that this kind of thing was happening? And how did portrait painters respond to the new advent of technology for portrait photography? And then the inclusion of further things beyond that. Right? How did digital art and the inclusion of the software like Photoshop in the early 90s change how artists at the time felt about how easy it was to edit, change, touch up a work? What about airbrushing actual photos, film photography? Did that change the essence and soul of art? Those are the kind of concepts I'm exploring right now, to see what the discourse was in that sort of more historical context and what it might mean for how we are currently approaching things like AI, which we're all sick of hearing about AI. I get it. I'm the same way. Danish Pastry. Oh, welcome to the chat. They said, to be honest, it's pretty simple. No matter the tool, just don't steal from others. Stealing is the problem. So I was thinking about that idea too. And then I kind of remember some art. I wonder if this is the right word. Let me pull it up. I was thinking specifically about collage, that style of art, collages, and famous instances of collage works. If they sent any, royalties at the sale of their work to the people who originally created the art that they're clipping out and collaging. What were the sort of rules beyond, like, let me see if I can find a good example. Just Guy says, photography became its own thing, and I like that. It did, but was it always seen as its own thing, or was the ability to take a realistic photo of a scene an immediate threat to those who were doing like landscape art, who their point was to go to these exotic, beautiful places and create renditions of them in their art? Why would someone potentially buy that when they could buy the photo? Now, of course, there's a lot of different things here, because like early photography, you could only have like a 5x7 photo printed on silvered glass in those early days, while you could have a huge work of art. But the early research so far seems to see that because photography didn't emerge initially as a creative thing, it was actually just like something that was played around with by sort of the science community as like almost like a fancy new fad kind of thing. And then as it became more accessible, it became a gimmick. And then as it existed as this gimmick for a long time of like going to get your portrait taken at a carnival or something, or at a fair with traveling photographers, over time it developed into its own art style. Which there's possibly some similarities between the advent of AI. But specifically in regards to what we were talking about with like, don't steal from other people's art, it made me wonder about, see if I can open up this image. It made me wonder about the laws behind collage art. I'm gonna pull up an example here. What do you guys think about this? What do you think about this? Because this is collage art, but it steals a composition. It steals elements of other protected works, other styles. How do we feel about this? I think collages would go under transformative works. Definitely. Looks like a Deftones album cover. It certainly does, doesn't it? I mean, it's definitely transformative, right? So then you would have to say like, okay, even though this has elements of other people's art, the result is astoundingly different. So it's its own thing. But it technically uses a bunch of concepts that this artist didn't own. So these are the things I'm exploring in this video. I'm not going to do it all in the live stream, because I like to gather my thoughts and research them and gather sources and excerpts and all these like examples. So the Mona Lisa thing, not so much what I'm talking about here, but SpongeBob's eyeball, Minnie Mouse's a bow, the Sega Genesis corporate logo in the background. I mean, these are all things that other people own. You know what I mean? This is Supreme, but hidden behind something. So yeah, I mean, it's always a little bit hard to express, you know, an exact analogy. I mean, clearly it seems like with the copyright at the bottom of this is like specifically what this collage is looking at, right? Specifically, this is about taking a bunch of copyrighted things, smashing them together into a transformative work, and then being like, hey, this is, each individual part is owned by potentially someone else, but the sum of them and putting them together in a different way is a new transformative work. So, I mean, you see what I'm saying? It's a little complicated. That's why I got to make sure I put all my stuff in a very well-researched sourced video and not talk about it on a live stream and end up in, you know, saying something I don't mean. So pretty interesting. So I'm just looking at some historical examples of how new technology in the creative space made artists respond to it, and then where all of that stuff ended up. Like, for example, Photoshop and the advent of digital art. How did But before digital art was a thing, when you could do something and then mess up and hit Control Z and fix it, how did other artists feel about this new medium, especially as digital art was something that became more and more prevalent? And at the time, how did we differentiate between these kind of two things? And then where did they go over history of now us having a very clear understanding of digital art is different than traditional art? How did they end up? And then hopefully looking at multiple examples of this, what are possible lessons we could learn as we talk more about AI? OmniViewer. Never heard of OmniViewer. But very cool, very cool. Yeah, I mean, you can always post it post it somewhere. Send it my way. Most of what I'm looking at now are, man, what is that term for sources from the day of like these things happening? It's not first person sources. It's like first person accounts, primary sources. I'm looking more into primary sources of like scholarly articles, newspaper, magazine articles in the creative space as this discussion was happening. Primary source. JPB coming in to save the day. There is a fantastic book, highly recommend for especially anyone interested in U.S. history, that is called The People's History of the United States. And it is full of primary sources of exactly how people were expressing their feelings of the current events of the world at the time in these, what we now see as like these pivotal U.S. moments in history, which was super cool. It's very different to experience or read an account of someone who was experiencing something at the time versus us writing about that history 300 years later with all the context that we now know. So I love that kind of stuff. All right, we got lots of stuff happening in the chat. So this is all things I'm exploring, right? In the video or in the script I'm writing today. So it's very interesting. Very interesting. And then, of course, I'm a writing channel. I'm not really an art channel. So all of this is in preparation to talk about AI and writing. Let me give you a little thought experiment. I'm gonna propose a situation of a writer using AI in their writing process. And I want you to tell me whether or not you approve, whether or not you feel like this crosses the line into the territory of this shouldn't be allowed in a space that supports human art, or whether or not you think that this is okay when it comes to the space of human art. Because we're writers, we're not artists. So let's try to get back in that writing space. So let me ask you this. Let's say someone goes to ChatGPT or Llama or whatever large language model, and they say, write me a nonfiction book on the history of Wisconsin. And they take that output and they slap a AI generated cover on it and they ship it off to Amazon as an ebook. That crossed the line? Is that bad? What do you think? We do have a couple artists. Very cool. Let me give you another example. What about someone who tells a large language model and says, you know what? Give me this nonfiction book on the history of Wisconsin. And then they take that output, this full, let's say it's 50 pages, and they rewrite it in their own voice. It's like copying your homework, but changing it a little so you don't get caught. Put a cover on it. Doesn't matter where the cover comes. Put it off onto Amazon. What do you think of that? Lots of people saying that probably crosses the line. Depends on your purpose of writing. What about someone who writes a synopsis of a story, plugs it into a large language model, and tells that large language model, put my synopsis of a story into a plot framework. And they get a whole Save the Cat beat sheet. Then they take that beat sheet and they go and they write the story purely by themselves without any other inclusion of AI. And they put that story out as a human written story. What do you think of that? Does that cross the line? Let me give you a couple more. What if, instead of putting it all into a plot framework, someone writes up a synopsis of a story that they want to tell? They go to an AI and they have a prompt created for what needs to happen in each chapter. Not a whole plot framework, just this chapter should start and end here. And they go and they write that. JPB says, I say using a framework is no worse than using one online. Same as a website for prompts, that's fine. Approved. What if you ask an AI for a prompt? Just a writing prompt. And then you go write a whole book off that writing prompt. That shouldn't be bad, right? Well, isn't a plot framework just a series of writing prompts? Is there any difference in writing a story based off an AI prompt versus a human prompt? I think the thing here is that it's very quick to say in a creative space, AI bad. AI bad. But in reality, there are these sort of this gradient of how much AI is being used, how much of the process comes from you. And then where do you personally draw the line? I think that's interesting. And that's kind of what I want to speak about in the video. It's not so much how much can you use AI in anything, but specifically, I think the issue is that it's more complicated than us saying AI bad. And there's even more stuff to discuss in the terms of like copyright and how that large language model was trained. But specifically, villainizing AI in writing, I think leads to the people who we know are going to use AI in writing, regardless whether or not the community says it's good or bad, they're still going to do it. Now, though, they're just not going to disclose that this book that they've written with AI is AI. I think being more open that AI writing or AI images could be a different form of art and creating a space for it would lessen the amount of non-disclosure sort of things, and also mean that we could further the idea of those who are not disclosing this, when there is a space for you to share it specifically for this kind of art, could lead to maybe a more restrictive punishment, as opposed to not having a space for this thing and punishing people who are breaking the rules. If there's a very clear place where you should share this kind of art, where people who are interested for whatever reason in AI writing specifically, to go explore and see what that technology is able to do, creating a space for it and sending everyone there who wants to use AI in their writing. Of course, the issue is whenever you use AI and you purposely choose not to disclose it in attempts to trick people. That's kind of the ideas. So that's sort of the point of the video, and I'm looking back in history to determine what are the steps that I think would be beneficial for us to take as a community to allow that to happen. Interesting concepts. And I started looking back at the invention, I think you'll like this. I think you'll like this. There is a theory. There is a theory in the art world, very controversial one, called the Hockney-Falco thesis. Let me tell you about this. This is really cool. This came up in my research today. Has anyone here ever heard of the Hockney-Falco thesis? You can look it up on Wikipedia. But the Hockney-Falco thesis came up in my research, and this was the idea that camera obscuras, which is like the pinhole camera, being able to take an image from outside, the phenomenon of light going through a pinhole and projecting that scene outside onto a wall in a more dimly lit room, this is the theory, right? The thesis was the idea that a lot of the really famous painters that we celebrate nowadays for their insanely incredible realism in art were actually using camera obscuras as as drawing aids. And that the explosion in the 1400s of realism from all these like incredibly talented artists that we celebrate for their realism was in part due to them using drawing aids that allowed them to trace more details. And that's why art became so realistic. And so I use that as a way to talk about, does this change how you think about these old celebrated works of art? Does that make you feel different about the product or the artists themselves, that they were using tools to help them achieve a better result? Let's look at some things here. Otero says, doesn't change anything for you. I kind of feel that same way. I kind of feel it doesn't really change. I mean, no one's safe. Even Vincent van Gogh gets hit with an allegation. Now, it's cool that the theory or the way that these two people, David Hockney and Charles Falco, kind of came up with this theory. David Hockney, artist, and physicist Charles Falco came up with this theory, was that there were some things in a lot of these famous works of art that were only able to be recorded because the image was coming through a lens. So the idea of like, hey, here we have like this carpet in the background of this photo that starts to get blurrier the further in the distance it goes. That doesn't happen with our eyes. That happens with a single camera lens. The fact that we can measure the difference in pupils in different characters at different lengths, or sorry, I should say distances in the composition of the painting, would be a telltale sign of one single perspective of a lens versus seeing something with your eyes. There's like these interesting little concepts that they explore. Very interesting, very interesting. Caused a lot of controversy because that came out in 2001, I think. And then immediately a lot of, especially art historians, were like, hell no. Me, my broken eyes, like, wait, things aren't blurry? Yeah, that's real. That's real. And then putting all this in the concept of like, does using a drawing aid to help you get down the details and trace things essentially, how is that reflected in the artistic community? Is that seen as taking a shortcut? Danish pastry, proud of you. I'm proud of you. I'm going to the dentist today. Be proud of me. Because that's scarier than the eye doctor. Last time I went to the dentist, content warning, I'm about to get a shot in the mouth. Last time I went to the dentist, they had to numb like the lower side of my jaw. And so they pull out this needle that's like this long. And I was just like, bruh, come on, man. Don't do this to me. They not only had to, inject like they had to dull the nerves for the tooth that they were working on. This was like a year ago. They had, because the nerves to access your bottom teeth go through like your jaw, like through the joint in your jaw to get to your teeth. They had to stick the needle through my mouth all the way back here. I could feel that guy back here under my ear. Don't love it. Don't love it. Here, let me go turn on a fan and we'll do some writing. So anyways, that is the video I've been sort of drafting up. It'll probably be a long time before I put that one out, just because I like to check on my facts. And if anyone's interested in being a research assistant, I could definitely use opinions on things where you feel like I missed the mark or need to be more clear, or like, this just ain't it, fam. Give a comment like that. This ain't it. This ain't it. All right. So anyways, there's a fun little interesting conversation for you. We all have opinions on it. We all draw the line at different places. Hard to talk about because of that. But worth talking about. Still worth the discussion. And that's the point. I'm not trying to say here's the solution. I'm trying to say let's have a discussion. And I want to hear your thoughts when that video comes out. Just like, you know, here's where I draw the line and why. Here's how my personal feelings have evolved this. I'm an artist and I feel this way. I'm not an artist and I feel this way. All those things are really good. Tario says, maybe we should differentiate more in art by not always referring to art as art, but as creations. I mean, labels definitely play a big part in that entire conversation, right? Art is seemingly specifically a human endeavor, right? Unless we're training an elephant to also be able to paint or something. But otherwise, a human endeavor. And so when now suddenly a non-human tool is able to create art, calling it art is going to feel wrong to a lot of people. All right. That's the end of the discussion. Let's go over here to our main screen. Shout out to Pro Writing Aid for sponsoring this video. Of course, you guys know I use Pro Writing Aid. I have it on as I'm writing. I can run these super cool reports, and I can check for things like, you know what? Let's go in here and make sure that my sentence length is varied enough. I'm not writing too many things of one specific kind of sentence length. Let's see what we got here. In this scene right now, sentence variety is 4.7 target over 3 sentences by word count. Looks like I write a lot of sentences between the 10 and 19 word sentences, but here I got some 28 word sentence. That's insane. What am I doing? Using these, what's the right way I want to say? I like saying it this way. Using editing tools like Pro Writing Aid is not solely about just clicking on the recommended way to change something, but it's about exploring your writing in a different way. So like when I do something like, let me check to see repeating words that I might overuse in my writing, I would be totally blind to this until I open up repeated 3-word phrases. I have some sort of listed twice here in this 400-word scene. So that kind of thing is valuable as a writer, to be shown that about your writing process. I don't have to do anything to actually apply this editing feedback to my story, but at least now I understand. That's really the value of Pro Writing Aid, is just being able to break down your writing in different ways. If you are interested in it, Pro Writing Aid is currently having their Black Friday sale 50% off. You can use my link below. I don't know if the discounts stack. I would not imagine that they do, but you can still go try it out now. And this is probably the best way to give it a shot and see if you like this tool at the lowest cost you'll probably get. I can't imagine they would go lower than 50%. I mean, half off is crazy. So check it out if you'd like to. Link below, Writing Theory 10 at checkout to get 10% off when you're not in the midst of a sale. But you can still use my link below to check this out. If you don't know, we do book coaching and developmental editing on my website, where I sit down with you to talk about your story and make it as strong as possible. It is so much freaking fun. It is like sitting down for an hour and breaking down your story and talking about what you're doing that's super awesome, what are areas we can improve on, ways that your story is going, what I really like about your writing process, what we need to focus on touching up in editing, all of this just in a one-on-one call where we have a ball doing it. It's a lot of fun. If you're interested, you can check it out at writingtheory.com. I think I have the link below for that too. That's all I got for the opening of the stream. Scene. I think it's about time we focus on some writing. Does anyone have any questions about writing before we get too far into our productivity side of the stream? Margot says their current chapter is making them cry. Love it. I hope it's in a good way, not like crying because you don't know what to do. I hope it's crying because you're having such a great time writing your story. But if you aren't crying or laughing or exhilarated by your writing, then can't imagine that the reader is going to be either. You should feel something about your writing. You are clearly the most invested person in your story. So if you, being the most invested person, are not going through highs and lows in your writing, who knows if your reader's going to either. Oh, Manon has some questions, but after the sprint, it looks like, you know what? Cue them up. Cue them up. We'll go ahead and do some productivity. Just Guy says, is Justify good? Are you talking about formatting your actual story? What if I have short dialogues? If you're talking about the formatting of your actual story and your document, doesn't make any difference, right? In whatever format, whatever alignment that you want. When you're outputting your story, that's when you have to make decisions about formatting. For right now, just writing whatever feels the best. If you like writing in Justify, feel free. Clearly, I write in just left align with some indentation. This is just the default Scrivener formatting. But right now, in your proto draft, don't worry about that. Put your nose to the grindstone, just keep on writing. We're going to worry about formatting when we're doing like our final round of editing. Don't get caught up on things like that just yet. Just yet. Because if you worry about formatting and editing, and that means you never get to the end of your story, then the formatting never mattered anyways. You know what I'm saying? Get that story down, then later you can work on editing it and making it look good. That's my advice. All right. I think it's time to do some writing. 10 minutes. Get 10 minutes out. We're 20-minute Andes here. 20-minute Andes. I'm officially in Act 2 of my story, which means that now we get to do a lot of fun investigation. Now I get to build up some conflicts between characters. I get to create the who's like the person that we think is the bad guy before we make the switch to understanding who actually is bad. All that great stuff. That's all Act 2 stuff. We love Act 2 stuff. All right. Just Guy says, I have a finished work and I'm thinking of polishing it up. That's all. Well, there you go. Danish Pacer says, do you find it hard to leave clues? That's a really great question. That's a really great question. I would say it's not hard if you first go through and solidify what your crime is. I did this on stream. I wrote a full, almost 1,000-word account of exactly what happens in the crime, and specifically making note of things like where the killer messed up or things that they decided to do in the heat of the moment that are going to be clues later. And I took all that and I put that into a list of clues. And so having this as almost like inventory I can pull from when I'm going through and writing my middle 50, I can kind of use the natural path of like where my characters are going to go and what kind of clues they can find there to say that, you know, here, one of my clues is they find this boat that was sunk. That would be a great place to have a bunch of clues. But first I got to get there, right? So there are some clues that are just more easily accessible, right? I created one that said the victim who had been killed and his wife who ran out of town because rumors are going around that she killed him and she was worried of what was going to happen to her, and lots of notes were being dropped off at her apartment saying that they were going to get her, right? Left town, boat went missing, victim died, but we find out that they are leasing out a camper to someone in this different part of the different part of Whittier in this campground, which is going to open up a lot of questions about us discovering more about who these people were without having to ask a bunch of questions around town and possibly getting caught by the higher ups for pursuing this thing. So it's almost like figuring out where your characters need to go and then what clues are there along the way. I'm kind of using location as one of the driving factors, specifically because the victim of the location of the crime isn't in the town. So how am I going to get my characters from the town to where they have enough information to go find out where this actual crime happened? So I made a list of all these clues, and I kind of know the locations of where they're going to be, and I'm using that as my breadcrumbs. The important part is you don't find all the clues in one location at once. For example, there's a list that keeps track of what boats leave out of this dock and come back. The Marina Logbook. But something on this doesn't quite line up, and later on we have this epiphany that there's actually webcams that are set up, which this is true in the Whittier harbor, that are always recording, and getting access to that to find the discrepancy between the logbook and this webcam to say, okay, what boat was the target of this cover-up is another clue that's going to lead us to another place, right? And even though technically that's accessible right away, we don't have the information we need to understand that clue yet. That's a really big thing. And this is coming as someone who's read, a couple different mystery, crime, thriller kind of books, watched a whole bunch of movies and TV shows about them, but I still wouldn't say I've ever written something like this. So I may be setting things up in a way that in my head makes sense, but it's a little riskier for someone who is very familiar with the genre that maybe this isn't the right approach. Which is why sometimes it's good to stay in the genres you really know and love because you know all those expectations. Manon says, question 1, speaking of Act 2, why is it not given much importance compared to Act 1 and Act 3 in a general story? That is the case. Just Guy says, I don't think that is the case. That is the case because so many plot frameworks, especially the ones that are reduced down into a little bit more of a simple sort of act. Most plot frameworks will just say Act 2 is like fun and games. They're like, you have your introduction and opening image, your inciting incident, your character goes on the quest, fun and games, climax, or rising action, climax. I agree with you that it is not given the same kind of focus, which is why some plot frameworks like Save the Cat are so renowned. It's because they do give that kind of focus. Hero's Journey gives Act 2 a lot of focus. Dan Harmon's Story Circle gives equal focus to Act 2 as it does to Act 1 and 3. But a lot of, especially when you look at things like a 3-act story structure, 7-point story structure, a lot of these kind of vague, abstract story structures, which are good for a lot of cases, just don't put focus on it. And that is frustrating. I would use something like a Save the Cat kind of plot structure to just peek around at what you think Act 2 should be like, what are they talking about, and get an idea of it. You don't have to fully commit to exactly how they order an Act 2. What I tell everyone, and I've said it here, is break your middle 50% of your story into 3 specific moments that lead you to the climax. It's a lot easier to plan out what happens after the inciting incident to that first climactic point in Act 2. And then from that point to the second one, that point to the third one, and then, hey, you're at the climax. So that's kind of what I've done in my plot frame. I agree. Breed of Otter says, Carson, looking sharp. Hold on. I can do this. Oh, yeah? How's it going? Hi. Stupid. All right. Let's do some writing. Manon, I am looking forward to your next question when we come back from our sprint. You know the deal. I am turning the lo-fi music up, the microphone off, 20 minutes on. Let's be productive. Love it. Catch you guys on the other side. Let's do it. first sprint done. That's crazy. That's crazy. It's so fast. It just happened so fast. It feels like 10 minutes. You know what I'm saying? I'm at 22,461. Ontario, 500 words. Millennium Storyteller, 400 words. Just Guy, 788. I'm on fire. You are on fire. Perfect timing, just finished. I'm in the middle of an action scene. Less than perfect timing. Less than perfect. Good job, everyone. Nice, nice. Very nice. Creative Otter says, I got 10 words in. Praise be. Creative Otter, I bet those were the greatest 10 words ever written. It doesn't take many words to change someone's life. JPB 400, nice. Margot says 97K overall. Let's go. Good job, Margot. Good job, Creative Otter. Good job, JPB. Jam and peanut butter. Jam and peanut butter. In my book, I'm reinforcing this theme of, we have the permanent residents of this town and we have the seasonal people. And I'm reinforcing the theme, it's us versus them, which is one of the major kind of themes of the novel. Us versus them. And our characters, our two main characters, kind of exist in between. They're both people who are not permanent residents who are living in the big apartment tower where all the other permanent residents live. They are both outsiders. They are both new here. They are both not really given the time of day by these permanent residents. Do they have a name for the seasonal people? Not really. Not really. Not really giving them names. But one of the big plot points is that, and I think I talked about this back in like the planning stage, which is that there's something really weird that happens when you live in a small town, especially especially a small town that seems to have a tourist population that comes through at some point in the year. One of the things I've noticed in the town that I live in is that the people who live here tend to see the tourists that come in almost like scavengers, which is crazy because those tourists bring a lot of money to the local economy. But there's kind of this feeling of like, you're just here to use our resources while the weather's nice and everything, and then you go away. While we are here all the time, and you using these resources is like, not cool, bro. It's kind of the vibe. Which I don't personally feel that way, but I think other people who might live in a small town, especially if people come out to visit that small town, might have seen that same sort of vibe or mindset. Very strange to me. Very strange to me. But I'm kind of channeling that in like an even more dramatic way. So in my book, we have a lot of people in this, as a permanent resident of Whittier, Alaska, make their living through going out and fishing on the harbor and in the ocean that the town's connected to. But we have some corporations that have started paying people to go for the fishing season and stay at Whittier and fish those same waters. Meaning that basically every fish that is caught by this sort of out-of-towner, the seasonal, the corporate fisherman, is a fish that a local fisherman wasn't able to catch. You're taking our resources. Now there's this like butting head kind of thing. And that's one of the main driving forces in the conflict that leads to a victim being murdered. And so I'm starting to tease out these sort of like conflict and how both parties contribute to this, how they both feel about it, and how weird it feels to be between these two things. Manon says, question 2. Question 2. Are there any books like Jurassic Park which challenge the generic way of storytelling and improve on them? I don't know personally if I feel like Jurassic Park does that. Are there any books like Jurassic Park which challenge the generic way of storytelling and improve on? And if anything, I kind of feel like the majority of Michael Crichton books approach storytelling in a very pulpy way, because Michael Crichton writes like a Hollywood movie, like an action movie, right? And especially even if you look at the second Jurassic Park book, it's even more so action than it is philosophy or science, which all of his books are sciencey, right? I mean, if you look at in some of his other books like Sphere, very science heavy, very philosophical, but still plays out like an action movie, right? Still has the same tropes of a lot of his books that have this idea of like, you know, let's take this certain group of characters, put them in a scenario where then everything starts to go wrong and they have to survive until the end of the situation where they can finally leave. Sphere, you're in like a base at the bottom of the ocean and a storm comes by and means all of the ships up at the top of the ocean can't help you if something goes wrong, and then guess what? Things go wrong. And Manon says, I'm coming on this since the movie is drastically different from the source material. It is, but not as much as you might think. When I first read Jurassic Park, which I read, of course, I think how most people nowadays have discovered Jurassic Park, you see the movie first, then you read the book later. The book had a lot more focus on like chaos theory, which was something that Michael Crichton, you know, explored with that character who's played by, it's the character Malcolm something, who's played by Jeff Goldblum in the movies. The book has an even more focus on this idea of like, what is chaos theory? I can't remember if they talk about string theory as well and how it exists in regards to that. But in both cases, it's still kind of an action movie. I would say it still fits generic storytelling, but it's written in a way where the characters are discussing more heady concepts, which you could get from other sci-fi authors like Neil Stephenson, who writes in a way of like, here's like this crazy sci-fi idea. It's very hard science fiction, but let's spend a lot of time discussing the aerodynamics of, you know, breaking the speed of sound, while in a Crichton book, it would be, let's spend this chapter talking about chaos theory. But in its essence, the reason Michael Crichton was so successful is that those books are still kind of pulpy, genre, fast-paced fiction. And, you know, it's been maybe 8 years, maybe longer since I read Jurassic Park for the first time. So I may be only remembering those kind of parts of the book that are the very heady, sciencey parts and the very action-heavy parts, because that's what I was reading it for. But don't get it wrong. Michael Crichton is writing pulp fiction, is writing accessible fiction for a general audience, meaning it has to be fast-paced. Sphere by Michael Crichton, I read in one night. It was that good. Like 300-something pages, and it just sucked me in. It's so good. I haven't seen the movie, and I don't think I would. I think they had to change the name for the movie to Abyss, maybe. Maybe there's a Sphere. But I don't know if Michael Crichton came up with this trope, but you've seen it done in other media too, which is like, let's take these people and we're going to stick them in like this base on the bottom of the ocean. I've seen it done in Archer now. Michael Crichton did it. I think there's a movie called Abyss that does it as well. That's not the Sphere. It's cool though. It's just cool. Michael Crichton's just awesome. Pirate Latitudes, great pirate story by Michael Crichton, flies under the radar. Of course, Andromeda Strain. I haven't read all of his books, but I've read most of them. I feel like I've read enough that I could do a tier list of Crichton books and have a lot to say. One day. Manon says, what makes written horror horror? Like, horror visually is meant to look and sound scary, but how writing horror is different than other mediums and the issue of sounds helping you. Okay, I'm going to take that last bit, sounds helping you, I'm going to disregard that, because horror in writing is a very cool concept. In fact, I just did a video where I took this... You guys are you might hate this video, to be honest. All right, I won't talk about the video yet. I was watching this interview with Stephen King. And Stephen King, of course, is the most prolific horror novelist that we have in modern day. I've read a ton of horror that's not Stephen King that this still expands to. Horror is the act of building atmosphere in a novel, I should say. Is the act of building atmosphere in a set of expectations and then twisting those expectations in a different way in one pivotal moment. And Stephen King likens it to comedy. In fact, he says comedy and horror essentially are the same thing in writing. It's building a set of expectations where you think you know where something's going, or you purposely don't know where it's going, and then twisting it at a pivotal moment, and horror leads to screams, and comedy leads to laughter. So what makes written horror horror? It's the idea of building atmosphere. It's the idea of building expectations. A book I read recently was The Trooper, or The Troop, I think is what it was called. The Troop by Nick something. Nick Cutter. Is that right? Yeah, let me pull this up. Pretty good book, all in all. Could be better, could be worse. You might have seen this on some bookshelves. It was kind of a trendy book in the Goodreads book space. This was the last horror novel that I read, and the whole idea was that basically parasites that gradually took you over. That's all I'll say about it, so I don't spoil it. And it very definitely, first off, body horror. If you don't like body horror, then don't read this book. You need to understand horror is not grotesque. It doesn't have to be. There are genres of horror that are purposely grotesque, like this, The Troop, which has all these elements of body horror. And I'm not going to speak about any of them because no one's really signed up for that in this live stream. But you have to realize you don't have to do things like this to have a horror book. There's also a very fine line between horror and thriller. Horror doesn't mean that you have to have a monster. Horror doesn't mean you have to have gruesome, bloody stuff. It's not like Saw, the movies. Horror doesn't mean it has to be psychological. Doesn't mean it has to be alien. All horror means is that the author is intending to build an atmosphere, to create a set of expectations for you and twist them at a point that you weren't expecting that makes you scared. Makes you queasy. How writing horror is different than other mediums, I can tell you this right off the bat. You would kind of answer this in the next part of your question, which is how does the issue of sounds like helping you in horror help establish a scene or help make a jump scare work? In writing, you don't have that. But what you do have is that internal narration of a character. You don't have to write horror in like first person, but getting in the character's head, especially in a horror book that has some kind of psychological aspect, is something that a movie simply cannot do. What horror in a novel does is it brings you into the atmosphere. It is like 90% atmosphere. Pet Sematary by Stephen King, great example of this. Great example of this. Foreshadowing, a great tool of horror. Stephen King does it all the time with those stylized chapters. Kind of saying that like, blah, 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 but everything could have gone a different way if I hadn't had picked up this knife. And then you're like, oh no, what's going to happen with the knife? Right? On Writing Horror has really good articles on it. I'm not purposefully interested in writing horror myself. This would be a great question for our Discord member, R.E. Holding, who has written some horror novels. But all in all, like for me, when I think of horror, I think of the atmosphere, the tension that you create with your specific word choice, the feeling of your characters, them knowing something's wrong and the reader knowing something's wrong, or them not knowing something's wrong, but the reader knows. It's like world building, but just in a certain area at a certain time. I think it is a common misconception that world building and atmosphere are the same thing. World building is about making decisions about who your characters are and what the land is like and what the political climate might be like. Atmosphere is everything, not just from your descriptions of the environment, but the tone of your voice. It is in your writing, the word choice that you use in your writing, purposely choosing descriptors that have a feeling of dread with them instead of using descriptors that don't. That's atmosphere. That's atmosphere. A really accessible look at that idea of atmosphere is going to A Series of Unfortunate Events, which may be the greatest work of atmosphere in a novel. That is one thing that book does better than almost anything else. Every single word that's chosen for things like descriptors, for things like locations, even the names of locations and characters and things that are happening are done to fit in the theme of the atmosphere of the novel. So world building, slightly different concept. World building is I'm planning a story. What's the world going to be like? Atmosphere is I'm intentionally making writing choices in the midst of a scene to make the reader feel a certain way, to present every aspect of this world in an intentional way. Hope that makes sense. Paint games, anything I don't know. Hello. Welcome to the chat. Must agree, atmosphere is everything. That's why space is great. But I hope that makes sense. All right, before we get to, I would love to continue the conversation and even hear question number 3 that I'm sure is hidden somewhere in there. Let's do another 20 minutes of writing. Another 20 minutes. I'm gonna put time on the clock. I'm gonna turn the mic off, the lo-fi up. You know how it goes. All right, good luck everyone. See you on the other side. Sprint number 2, down and out. Not bad, not bad. Let's see, I'm at 23,188. 88. How'd everyone do? Tariel, 380 words. Let's go. That's awesome. Good progress. Good progress. 8 hundo by Just Guy. Not bad. Not bad. Not bad at all. What else we got? I think we lost some people. Some people in the last sprint, and that's okay. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Ain't nothing wrong with that at all. Oh man, I have to say, I think doing this writing for me personally has been some of the least straining writing, maybe. I think normally when I write, I'm sitting down for I might sit down for 3 or 4 hours doing this Pomodoro style writing. But then it's just me and my headphones, you know? But something about doing this writing, even on days when I'm not really feeling like I'm gonna make a lot of progress. When you're sitting down for 2 hours writing, there's nothing else to do but write, you know? Nothing else to do but make some progress. Pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. Also, there's something about having your writing on the live stream where everyone can see it, which means that you think a little bit more about the words you write down. I think I write at a little bit of a faster pace when I'm writing by myself. But I think that the writing I do on live stream, I might rewrite a sentence or two more times because I'm trying to get it more right the first time. Because I know it's on screen for people. Maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. When I did Starlight Farms, I foolishly wrote the book and then I rewrote the whole thing all over again. Because I was like, it doesn't feel like the tone that I was using for the proto draft didn't really feel like it, you know. I felt like I could do it better to fit the story. Which maybe that's something about writing a story that has such a specific feel to it versus writing something that's like a modern thriller kind of story. I feel like it's a little bit more, my natural writing voice maybe fits the modern thriller more so than like a fairy tale style thing. Terrio says, I don't even know how you do it. I could not get a word down knowing someone was watching me. Well, part of it is helpful knowing that you guys are doing your own writing. That you aren't watching me on my screen and then he did this. Oh, I saw him rewrite the sentence 4 times. You don't spell tank top like that. It's hyphenated, Carson. It's hyphenated. You know? I don't expect you are all doing that. I know you're writing your own thing. This past chapter, I had to make a new character. You see, I typically plan all the most important characters, but then I'll throw in new characters as I'm writing, kind of willy-nilly. So I decided, you know, there is this campground where all of the seasonal fishermen kind of people kind of reside, and I decided to sort of add in kind of a menacing character there that is going to be sort of the de facto leader of these kind of people. And also is kind of like the watchman of the campground. His camper is right near the entrance, so when my cop guy comes all walking in hey, oh, hey, how's everyone doing? He's the guy who comes out to talk to our main character to sort of be like, why are you here? Did the sheriff send you over here? And then kind of to paint the vibe of you know, don't mess with us, don't mess with them. Kind of fun. I like making characters like that. Also, creating characters to reinforce the theme, big pro tip. it's so much better to reinforce a theme, in my opinion, using a character versus just building it through narration. All right, having a character that supports your theme versus just saying it in the description of the scene or in your character's head, way more impactful. Margaret says, I also cried. Oh. Was that the end of your story? I know you said you're at like 97,000 for your last thing. How close do you feel like you are to the end of your story, Margot? I'm still here in Act 2, the early half of Act 2. Yeah, just got a sad ending. How do you all feel about a story that ends with the main character dying? What's the consensus here? Is that not a satisfying story? Want to keep writing every day? Hey, that would be a good habit to form. What's the consensus, though, for a main character dying? Do you feel like that's a not satisfying story? Because there's no, like, happily ever after? Or do you think it can work? I think when I think about it, I think I really only know, off the top of my head, one story that ends with the main character actually dying. Barbara says, last day will be a prologue plus epilogue. That's really fun. It's kind of a nice way to pin everything down. I like that. I think I've always wanted to write a story where the main character dies at the end, but I always feel like it's going to be seen as like not a good thing. This guy says, maybe not sad if they did something great. If their death had like a purpose, right? Every time I think I'm bold enough to do that, when I'm like planning out a story, I always end up thinking, will this ruin it for the reader? Because I think in most cases you want to see like all the stuff that we did to get here pays off for the character. Pays off in some way where they get the life that they wanted. And that's really satisfying. Is it always going to be less satisfying to have your main character die? Dario says death needs to be reasonable in a way. I mean, there's definitely the idea of an earned death when it comes to like a narrative story. Definitely not something that's just like a flash in the pan, this happened. Yeah, I for real can only think of one specific story where the main, like, and I don't want to say any spoilers, of course. Can you think of any? Not even put in the title, but can you think of like more than one story where at the end of it all, and this includes like a series, at the end of it all, the main character dies? I think it's just not done very often. And I have to think that's for a very specific reason. You know what I mean? The Bible. Touche. Certain movie about a dog and their owner. No spoilers, no spoilers. Oh, man. Yeah, I was just thinking about that because I was like, there have been a couple stories where I've wanted to be like, you know, we built all this stuff up. You love the character. How emotional would it be to end that story with that main character making the ultimate decision? But every time I consider it, I'm left with, that would be like a way to subvert story structure kind of stuff, but I don't know if it would be better. Is killing your main character cheap? Also, in both of these cases, I'm thinking about a certain movie about a dog and their owner. I don't know if you're talking about Old Yeller or if you're talking about What's that called? Marley and Me? I would argue that the dog is not the main character. Old Yeller, the main character, is that kid. Who's not named Yeller, so I have to imagine he's named Old. The kid named Old. And then Marley and Me I haven't seen in a long time. Speaking of dog works of art. Speaking of dog stories, has anyone here read The Art of Racing in the Rain? The Art of Racing in the Rain. That's another dog perspective story. No spoilers. I feel like every dog movie, I feel like I was breaking boundaries by writing a story where the dog doesn't die. It doesn't. You don't even think the dog dies. I'm a genre bender, a rule breaker. I'm a genre bender, rule breaker, big stepper, underground methods. That's all I know. 10 toes in when we're standing on books. Let's go. All right. We got 10 minutes left, 10 minutes left. Let's run some reports. Let's see what kind of reports we can run. I want to go back to a big chapter. We got lots of material to work with. My opening chapter. Tariel says, "Oh my, I just remembered a book I never got to finish, but I read the last pages and she dies. But it was written a bit like a biography, so that was to be expected." That still feels unsatisfying. Now, of course, you can always append in any sort of writing advice things like, unless you do it well. But that feels unsatisfying. That feels unsatisfying. Let's open up some reports. And let's see. Let's see some style reports. Analyzing your text. Passive verbs out the wazoo. Repeated sentence starts. I'm okay with that. Readability enhancements. To try to help. That's fair. That's fair. That's fair. That's fair. Help. You right. Pro Writing Aid. Style report is pretty cool. The summary report's one of the big Pro Writing Aid reports. Tara says, "I ain't naming the book, but her one true love was already awaiting her, so I cried heavily, and he died after a third of the book." He died after a third of the book. That's kind of like the only way I feel like you can swing it. Is like the idea of like going to your loved ones in the afterlife, you know? It's okay that he died because blah, blah, blah. For those who haven't seen it, this is the summary report. Summary report. This is like all in one. This is like run one report and get everything. No big deal. But quote consistency 100%. Let's go. Passive voice is I could improve my passive voice. Grammar score 54%. Oof. Oof. Big oof. Spelling score 90%. I beg to differ. What else we got in here? Grammar score 54. That's pretty low. Pretty bad. Grammar check. Aim for 0 grammar mistakes. No. Rise and fall stories like Hamlet and Scarface usually have the protagonists die due to their hubris. That is the traditional tragedy, right? Isn't that kind of like a necessity of the old Shakespearean tragedies? Wow, look at all these things. Writing style check. A couple readability things. Passive voice. You know, I don't think anyone cares about this. I want to do a video on passive voice. Here's the thing. I mentioned this in one of my videos. I reached out to a professor about this and everything. Why is passive voice, which at least in casual conversation is used so often and feels like the natural way to speak, seen as such a bad thing in writing. And I'm not even talking academic writing. I'm talking in like fiction. Passive voice is like I think the definition of it is like it takes the action off of the noun, and it's like a roundabout way to get action from the verb to the noun, and that's why it's called passive. But like, when it feels so natural, if you're trying to write something that feels natural, why is it a bad thing? You know what? I'm gonna write something in all passive voice and we can decide ourselves. Feels more like a description, says Just Guy. Dig that. Let me show you more of my report. Emotion tells breakdown. What the heck? Oh, you know what's something really cool? I wonder if I can zoom in on this. How can I do this? Here's something really cool. If you, oh, please, I wish I could. Open image in new window. Can I do this? This would be cool. Download image. Still working? All right, I can't show it very well here. Here's something kind of interesting. Something you can do with pro writing is you go into your settings and you can say, here is another author who, yeah, see, Etereal sees it. Here is another author who I like their style and maybe I want to emulate it. And I chose Brandon Sanderson here because I wanted to grab some screenshots at one point. And I never ended up doing that. But now you can see it here. Here is a style of an author. They have a huge list of like 200 authors. And it analyzes some of their writing to create benchmarks for certain things. And then when you run this report for the writing style, it compares your writing style with them. And so some of the actionable feedback that you get is not only in regards to correct grammar, but also in regards to you trying to achieve a certain kind of writing style. So if you wanted to write like Brandon Sanderson, you can see here, it says, I use some emotion like astounded or enthusiastic or warm, but Brandon Sanderson never uses those. But he might use the word good, he might use safe or pleased or angry. And so it gives you some feedback specifically relating to authors that you want to try to connect with. I think it does that more so in other cases. Here we go. Bad adverb usage. Brandon Sanderson's killing it with bad adverbs. I got no clue what that is. I also was able to set a genre because I like to write typically in fantasy. So all of these things are giving me like the average for fantasy. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Sentence length. Oh my God, look at my sentence length. That's crazy. That sentence variety is insane. But still not as good as Brandon Sanderson. Brutal. If you are interested, let's see if I can open it up. I might be able to. Here, I'll show you all the different authors that they have. You go into your settings. Is that where it is? I gotta go find it. Let me see if I can go hunt it down. Because I think there's a web portal where you actually do this. All right, give me 1 second. I'll show you. But it's pretty cool. Pretty cool that you can do that. I think I just go to the website. I'm logged in. See if we can go hunt this setting down. Setting. Here we go. All right. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, like this could be really useful if there is a specific style you're going for. You can see here, I went on to the website for Pro Writing Aid. and I went to like the account settings, and every time you're running a report, it's referencing some of these settings that you set up. And you can see here, you want to write like Agatha Christie, Arthur Conan Doyle, Brandon Sanderson, C.S. Lewis, Clive Barker. I think he does some horror stuff. So there's your Dean Koontz, Ernest Hemingway, George R.R. Martin, Tolkien, Rowling. There's a ton of different names here. Oh, can you see it? Yeah, you can see it. Ken Follett, which I really want to see Pillars of Earth. Really want to read Pillars of Earth. There's a book reviewer who I wholeheartedly trust named Patrick Leo, who's awesome, especially in regards to fantasy and science fiction. They said this Ken Follett book was 10 out of 10, one of the best books they ever read. Orson Scott Card, Nicholas Sparks. I wonder, Sarah J. Maas, for all the massholes in chat, let's go. Stephen King. So it looks at some of their writing and it gives you information compared to, here's what your document has, here's kind of how the average Stephen King information is sort of judged, scored, graded. That's pretty cool. What do I want to write for this book? I think I'd rather... I don't know. I'll keep it at Brandon Sanderson. Kind of a cool thing, though. One day, Carson Long will be on that list. Ayo! That's what's up. But that's all I got for you guys today. That's all I got. You guys have any questions about Pro Writing Aid, about what to expect for this week or next week? Because we're in our final 2 weeks of Novella November. Final 2 weeks of Novella November. Isn't that insane? We're over halfway. I think that's pretty insane. At this point, I should, if I don't do any writing off screen, I should be ending my story at like 40,000 something words, which is pretty good. We'll see if that gets all the content down or if I'm going to keep working, but yeah, one day at a time, we keep pushing. Time does fly. Time does fly. At the end of November, I'll probably take a couple weeks to finish doing my draft maybe, but I think I might end up doing some live streams to help people through the editing process as well. At least show my workflow when it comes to editing, answer some questions about editing, things like that. But the daily live streams will come to an end. Oh, I know. But that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you to Pro Writing Aid for sponsoring the live stream. I'll run some more reports in the future. I think they're pretty cool. Sometimes I learn some stuff about my writing, and that's pretty dope. But otherwise, appreciate you being here. Hope you made some good progress. I know I did. I think we ended today with 1,400 words, and I'm totally fine with that, especially when it doesn't feel like a big effort personally. Like these live streams, pretty chill. So yeah, you know what's happening tomorrow. I'll be there in our evening time slots. I hope to see some of you guys there. Hope you have a great rest of the day. Take care. I'm going to go eat some lunch. Let's go. See you guys.